Welcome. Thank you for joining another Blue Yonder LinkedIn Live. My name is Marina Mayer, Editor-in-Chief of Food Logistics and Supply and Demand Chain Executive, and I will also be your host for today. Joining me, we have David Carell, lecturer and research scientist with the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics, and Hongmo Yang, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Manufacturing Sector with Blue Yonder. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good to be here. Thank you, Marina.
Thank you. Very glad to be here.
Of course. So today we will be discussing the 2021 State of Supply Chain Sustainability Report conducted by the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics and the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, issued earlier this month. This report explored the topic of supply chain sustainability practices and how companies globally are viewing them. So let's kind of just jump in a little bit and learn a little bit more about this. Dave, we're going to kick it off with you. Many predicted the pandemic would have a significant impact on supply chain sustainability. Yet the 2021 State of Supply Chain Sustainability Report shows that momentum did not slow down in 2020 for large companies. As one of the report authors, why do you think that is?
Gosh, thank you so much for the question. And I want to pause just to note, I'm so glad you said co-authors. I'm one of many. It was a real team effort, and I want to acknowledge my colleague, Dr. Alexis Bateman, who really kicked this off, Kellen Betts, Dan McCool, Ken Cottrell, Arthur Grau. Lots of people did a lot of work to make this happen. I'm just the face on LinkedIn Live today. But to get more specifically to your question, I think we thought when this data went out, and so we're analyzing data 1 year back when we released the 2021 report. So we're talking about how people felt in September of 2020. And if you think about, in your own experience, how you felt then, I think we were all, really scared and really wondering what the pandemic meant for us and how to best manage our businesses and our lives under the pandemic. And so we had the thought that perhaps the respondents might have framed supply chain sustainability under the pandemic as something they couldn't afford to take seriously. Like the pandemic was maybe something that happened to them and they needed to pass. But what we saw in the results, as you brought out, that really wasn't the case for a lot of respondents. In fact, we have a pie chart, if we could show for just a second. And if you look at that, you see that 46% of respondents, when asked since the start of COVID-19, my firm's commitment has, they said it hadn't changed the same, it stayed the same, and 36% said it even increased. And so if you think about that, when you think about 82% being undaunted during this really, unprecedented in our lifetimes global pandemic, that was a striking result. Thank you for the pie chart. And on the research side, our mission is really just to bring that data to smart people like your readers and the viewers of this. But as we've done it, two interpretations have come out that I would want to share. The first one, and I think this was really amongst the early adopter community, as the report went out and people read it right away, I think the first interpretation was, well, supply chain sustainability is just that important, that people's commitment to it, even during a hard time, is testament to how critical the issues are to solve, which is one interpretation. But as the report has sort of been out in the world a little more and it's been sort of circulated a little more, and maybe our findings have been interpreted by a later adopter audience, another interpretation has come to the fore that I'd bring to this community too. And that's that, perhaps as the people who led the firms where our respondents worked, they were thinking about all the benefits that come to them from supply chain sustainability investments. And they were thinking about not losing that momentum in 2022. So, when we think about what does a portfolio of supply chain sustainability investments mean, some of the practical things it can mean to leadership at firms are improvement of recruitment of top talent. It can mean access to financing. It can mean protecting the brand reputation. And so I suspect it's also possible, a second interpretation of the data, is that the firms we surveyed were sort of thinking about or keeping in mind the successes along those same dimensions in 2022 when they answered the questions in 2020.
So that's interesting. So Hongmo, I'm going to shift things to you. What challenges hinder the success of sustainability efforts in companies, and what role do supply chain professionals play in overcoming them?
Yeah, great question. I think first, I think it's great to see that the the staying power of sustainability as a theme, even in the shadows of COVID-19. Just in terms of the challenges in maintaining sustainability efforts in companies, I think the first, that comes to mind is people are so, focused on different priorities, different things that are in front of them. Like, even with COVID, I think about, it's great that the companies continue to stay with sustainability as a theme, but it's also had a little bit of a negative impact in terms of, there's more direct to consumer shipments, for example, that's causing more last mile deliveries and more packaging associated with the direct to consumer and so on. So, those are some challenges. You also have other kind of focus and challenges of the day, things like, the Suez Canal, the, business continuity with chip shortages. All of these things are all kind of leading to potentially taking away focus from sustainability. And so, what can you do about it in terms of a supply chain professional playing in terms of overcoming some of these? I think the first thing is, you have to have consistency and purpose. And what that means in some ways is, it has to be kind of ingrained in the fabric of how you run the business operations, and being able to feel like this is not another initiative that you have to kind of manage, but how do you make your operation, how you run your business that accounts for what that means in terms of sustainability and not being too siloed in terms of different initiatives. Recently I've had a discussion with a good friend, Yanis Skoufalis, who is the former chief product supply officer at P&G for many years. One of the things that he talks about, and I think this is a really something that I can empathize with, is a lot of times, you end up being, as a supply chain professional, you could end up being too siloed in terms of the things that you do. Okay, we deal with, customer shipments, we deal with, manufacturing and supply chain within the four walls, and then you deal with supplier ecosystems. But you also need to kind of think about not only doing sustainability well in that, but also weighing in and leaning into how do you do a better job of thinking about product and packaging design, and not necessarily just thinking about, okay, how do we do, just the supply chain portion, because a lot of the product and packaging design and so on will have an impact, very significant impact on the supply chain and also the sustainability of the company in terms of its business in the ecosystem.
So Dave, one of the highlights from the report was that the pressure to pursue sustainability in supply chains is coming from multiple sources. However, between 2019 and 2020, the pressure from investors and industry associations grew the most. In your opinion, how are attitudes towards the importance of supply chain sustainability changing if market-savvy investors are showing more interest in the movement?
Oh, that's a great question. And as a researcher, I'm always nervous to give my opinion, but I will do my best to not overshadow interpretation of our results. But you're prescient, I think, to zoom in on the investors piece. What I see closest, and I'd be curious about Hong Mo's and anyone else's thoughts too, is that 10 years ago, if I think about investment in supply chain sustainability, it felt to me like sort of a niche play, right? So maybe you had a project, then you could find specialty houses that invested in those kind of projects a decade ago. But I think that really has changed. And now that we see that some of the bigger firms and the bigger investment groups are stipulating the importance of ESG in their investment portfolios, that really changes the feeling, in my interpretation anyway, from something like a niche play to more like table stakes. So now sort of to play in modern business, the notion is that you have to have some feeling for ESG and sustainability and what your firm, has done and where it can go in that. And, then to my own, you'll probably hear me quiver as a scientist talking about personal experience, but I think it might be relevant, is that I see the change in the classroom too because of this. Because if we change the nature of sustainability projects from sort of a niche specialization project to a table stakes project, then it changes the kind of students that join, my classes on campus about sustainability, or my colleague Josue's, or, many of the great sustainability classes all over the country right now. If students perceive supply chain sustainability as a problem the world has and a problem that the world will pay them to solve, we get a different kind of student in the classroom, and we start to get the students who are not only just the early adopter advocates, but we also get I think some of the more pure analytical or pure analyst students, and they interpret that table stakes situation as, all right, if this is the problem, let me bring my best analytical mind, maybe the fanciest math I know how to do, to it, and I'll try to solve it. And special shout out to our student authors on this report, Jason and Ani, for doing exactly that, for bringing some really sophisticated methodology to our report. And to me, that's what it changes, I guess, from the educational perspective too, is that when our classroom expands from just the advocates to the advocates plus the analysts and everyone who feels that they're somewhere in between, that's when our crew is really, really the strongest.
Sorry, I couldn't get myself off of mute.
No problem.
People in my house want me to mute all the time, and for some reason I couldn't get off of mute. Sorry about that. So, Hangmo, what other key initiatives are either positively or negatively impacted by a company's focus on sustainability?
So, I think Dave made a point about, this is not a kind of a special initiative, but more of a table stakes. I think there's a movement, with the, I guess what I would call stakeholder activism, where people are not just looking at kind of the shareholder returns, but also the impact on greater stakeholders for the company and so on. And the employees have a big say in that, in terms of, really caring about, okay, what the company is doing has an impact on the environment and sustainability kind of going forward. So a lot of the, initiatives as relate to stakeholder activism, a lot of the investors that are making a decision that they're not going to invest in companies that are, not as clear in terms of their ESG goals or performance. I think those are all things that are positively impacting companies' sustainability, and obviously investors, employees, this whole notion of stakeholder activism. Those are all things that are going to impact the executives to think more about these issues and bringing them to the fore. The things that are negatively impacting companies' focus, that we talked a little bit about it. Packaging, excess packaging, for example, that is required in order for us to be able to deliver direct to consumers and so on. And then things related to how people are really thinking about especially if you think about supplier management, being able to take ownership of, if it's done, it's normal thing that they have this type of labor practices in certain part of the world, we just accept that. Well, people need to now take a little bit more ownership around wanting to make sure that there's fair labor practices and so on. And taking that ownership is going to be more important. The other things as related to customer expectation for responsiveness and, how quickly they're able to get the order. There's more and more of an expectation that, we're going towards same day. That obviously is going to have an impact in terms of, additional miles, additional, carbon emission, more shipment, packaging, and so on. And that is going to have an impact. And, we have to be able to think about how do we, optimize and respond to that in a more responsible and sustainable way going forward.
Perfect. So I'm going to open this next question up to both of you. Dave, we'll let you start, but it is open for both of you. Sustainability is one of the many trends shaping the future of the industry. So what other trends do you think companies need to embrace in order to continue to adapt and thrive?
Gosh, well, there's a first one that comes to mind from the report, and then we'll see how long we can go for. I'm excited to hear from Hong Mo too. But the first one is that one of the most interesting findings to me in the report, and so a little bit of report background is useful here. We've done it twice now, so this is the second annual. So we've essentially asked the same question to a respondent group 2 years in a row. And one of the things that's most interesting to me is that it looks like sustainability may be kind of a nebulous topic, meaning that the same issues didn't have the same importance year on year. And I think we have a chart. If we could show that quickly, I'll show you what I mean. So on the left side of this, you see different dimensions that respondents could report as an area of focus in their firm's supply chain sustainability goals. And then on the right side, in the blue and orange there, you see the change year on year. And one of the things that we really were thinking about as we saw this was, if you look at the growth in supplier diversity, equity, and inclusion, that was really quite interesting. If you look at the growth in employee welfare and safety, that is really quite interesting to me. Thank you for the chart. And we'll share the link for anyone who wants to spend more time with these charts. But to me, it means that it's possible that sustainability itself is kind of a nebulous or a protean concept. And practically for managers, that might change the way we think about managing to it. So maybe a future world will be different than today's world, in that a firm can't just say, these are the metrics we're going to pin our sustainability efforts to. And they might be chosen out of convenience or, how related they feel to the product that you make. But maybe the world is going to tell us every year a little different message on what they want from us for us as a sustainable supply chain. And as much as I know that's a pain in the butt to manage to, I think that might be the reality going forward. And I think that's a real challenge for those of us who are interested in thinking about how to manage sustainable supply chains.
So just to add to that, Dave, I think one of the things that I read in the report is that the executives are the ones who have to take, the leadership in terms of being able to say, this is a priority for the business. And, it flows down from there. I think, executive leadership and thinking about making it as part of making sustainability as a part of the fabric of the organization, how you manage the business. And I'm not advocating by any means that we boil the ocean. I think that's the farthest thing that you want to do, but you want to have a kind of a overarching theme that, we really do want to have sustainability as a consideration in terms of how we manage our business. There's some external things that, like we talked about, investors deciding not to invest in, not companies that are not environmentally or ESG wise, not very well managed. I think I saw, SEC is considering some requirement for disclosure for environmental impact. All of those things, and then obviously a lot of the employees, especially the younger generation, Gen Z and millennials and so on, having more of a say in terms of the sustainability importance. I think all of those things are going to be really important. I want to kind of talk a little bit about as you get these external influences in terms of companies needing to embrace and continue to adopt and thrive in terms of sustainability. I think there is a lot of work that needs to get done. I think a lot of the customers, that we talk to, and a lot of the companies that we see, they do talk about sustainability, but I would kind of venture to say only a few of them have actually gone to the step beyond just having Excel spreadsheets, starting to measure these impacts. There are some leading companies that are starting to collect at a much more systemic data lake level, where they're able to collect the various metrics related to sustainability. But that is something that, one, executive focus on, sustainability is part of our business. And then what do you do about it from both the process, system, data levels, and with a certain aspirational targets that you put on as the objective, what are the things that you're preparing the organization to execute upon in terms of the theme of sustainability. I think those are some of the things that companies will need to prepare for, and the executives need to kind of set some priorities so that they can respond in a organized manner.
Just to follow that up, if I could, we have a data point in this year's report that really supports what Hong Mo just said. So one of the things that the research team did was correlate commitment by sector to which source of pressure the respondent felt the strongest. So that's sort of a fancy way of saying, and shout out to Ani for doing this logistic regression work. Basically, when respondents had the strongest level of commitment, where did they report feeling the strongest level of pressure? And across almost every dimension, it was company executives. So I think we really have a data point there that suggests action is tied quite strongly to support at the top, or as we joked around about it, everyone cares about what their boss thinks first. So that is real and evident in our data.
And I think, just in terms of whether it's SEC with the disclosure requirement or, investors with the public, announcement that they're not going to invest in companies that are not environmentally or ESG savvy, those are all going to have an impact in terms of, executives paying attention to this and consumers and customers and employees having the same kind of influence. That is going to have an impact on the executives, and then hopefully we'll make it all the way down. And companies are able to take action to really address, how they can better manage from a sustainability perspective.
So we did have a question. We had a couple questions come through on LinkedIn, but there was one that I'm going to ask if we have a couple minutes. Because I'm just kind of curious what your answers are, because I think it's a good question. What part can supply chain play in product lifecycle sustainability?
Sure. So the first two that come to my mind, and I think my mind was primed to think about it from Hong Mo's comments earlier, packaging plays a role there. When we think about the whole product, not just the unit itself, but the potential circularity of the packaging is really an issue of supply chain design and also product design, but probably both hand in hand. So I think that's one piece. And the second part, it's a really exciting part in our research field, is the idea of planning for reverse logistics. I think sometimes people think that, well, if I understand the forward deployment logistics, the backwards is just the same thing the other way. And it's actually much, much more complicated and problematic. So supply chain, I think, can play a key role in, if we decide we want our products to be recycled or even upcycled, there needs to be a cost-effective system to do it. And that's a big challenge that the supply chain will be part of, I think.
Yeah, just to add to that, product packaging is clearly one where people can have a pretty good impact. The other is, you have to kind of think about your product design from a perspective of how are you going to be able to recycle, or, even you think about like the maybe a trivial, maybe not so trivial, but example of EV batteries, and there is a shortage of lithium, in terms of, having people mine that and then having it processed, maybe not as environmentally responsible, and so on. And then when you kind of, exhaust the life of that battery, what do you do with it? And how do you actually take that and recycle it so that you can actually use that again? I think there are companies that are starting to come up where they're recycling, for example, lithium ions from the EV batteries and so on. But I think that also kind of pushes upstream in terms of, as you think about your product design, how do you design your product such that it naturally enables ease of recycling and ease of the circular economy, and I think that will be something that companies will have to increasingly pay attention to.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for joining us today. Thank you to our wonderful audience for watching, for participating, for engaging. We had some good feedback on the screen. For more information on the report, you can go to sscs.mit.edu. The link is also on the screen in front of you. And we hope to see you on a future LinkedIn Live. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, David.
Hey,
Thank you.